Well, good evening, everybody. Welcome to our AJA Zoom event, both to our regulars and to any new people this week. Welcome also to those watching on Facebook and to anybody listening to the audio replay, which is broadcast every Thursday and at midday and Sundays at 4 p.m. on J-Air Jewish Community Radio. You can find that at FM 88 in Melbourne or at j-air.com.au. My name is Alan Friedman, Vice President of the Australian Jewish Association. And you can also see on your screens David Adler, who's President of the AJA, as well as our two main guests for tonight. That's Bobby Brown and Adrian Treger. But we also have two extra guests. That's Dimitri and Avi, also from Ariel University. And you'll see in a moment why we have them with us. This week, we're going to have a presentation format for about 15 minutes, after which David will chat with Bobby and Adrian, and then we'll take questions from the audience as usual. If this is your first time joining us, what we ask you to do is raise your hand electronically. So you do that down in the reaction icon. That indicates to us that you want to ask a question and we put you in the list. Written questions can be placed on the chat function, and Robert Gregory, our Director of Public Affairs, will read out some of these in between the spoken ones. Now, just before we get to the main topic for tonight, we're going to have a briefing on Ukraine by Dr. Avi Weber, an Ariel University Fellow who was an advisor to Chancellor Angela Merkel and is an expert on Europe and who happens to be there now or on the way there now, and Dr. Dima Course, who is also an expert on Russia. So we're just going to take a few minutes because they're on a tight schedule and they have other obligations to meet. So I'm going to hand over to Adrian Treger to introduce their other two colleagues, and then we'll have a little bit of a word about Ukraine. Adrian?
Thank you very much. Firstly, thank you to everyone for joining us tonight. We are very excited and appreciate you making the time. I'll cut very quickly first. Thank you very much to Avi and to Dimitri. They both, Avi is actually in the airport about to catch a plane, and Dimitri came out of a conference when we asked him last minute to give us this update. So thank you both very much. Avi also spent many years working with Bobby, actually doing restitution projects to bring restitution to Holocaust survivors. A wonderful, wonderful project. Avi, let me hand over to you quickly because you are catching a plane soon. If you could please just give some insight into the effects of the situation in Ukraine on Europe, specifically Germany, and also perhaps you can touch on how it may affect Israel. Avi, you're mute. No, sorry, Avi's on mute. Can we unmute him?
Hi, good evening to you all. I hope that you can hear me right now.
Yes.
Right. So in my short talk, I'd like to speak about two important issues. One is the change within Europe as the war unfolds in the Ukraine. And second is, of course, the question where Israel stands in this issue. Let me start off by briefing you about the situation in Europe and mainly in Germany. Germany has been a big supporter of Russia up until last Sunday, meaning that Germany was actually one of the countries basically blocking sanctions against Russia and trying to mediate between Moscow and Washington and trying to take a position that basically was trying to interfere or to stop or to slow down any European intervention or any European positioning against Russia. This has, of course, changed entirely over the last weekend. On Sunday, in a special meeting of the German Bundestag, the new Chancellor made a new speech, which was here portrayed as a State of the Nation speech, in which he ordered the finance ministry to come up immediately with 100 billion euros to invest immediately in the German military. Germany found itself completely unprepared to the current conflict in the Ukraine. As some of you might know, a request was made by the Germans to the Americans, and over 15,000 soldiers have already arrived in the last week and landed on German soil. Also, airports and American installations have been extremely beefed up. And one of the concerns that Europeans have that the Ukraine will be the first step. I'd like to draw again your attention to the fact that in the run-up to the invasion, the Russian president has also noted that he would like to have the NATO forces retrieved and sent back from all position in Central and Eastern Europe. The Germans are now, after his attacks on West Ukraine, are extremely concerned and worried. And thus, the German paradigm has completely changed in the line of not only preparing themselves to a possible fight or conflict with the Russians, but basically are taking a very strong position within the European Union to slow down steps of Ukraine. The speech basically, just to round up the German situation, the speech basically spoke about stocking up the military immediately. The Germans were actually blocking the SWIFT sanctions within the European Union, and these sanctions have been approved. So the German opposition has been override. So they've changed their position vis-a-vis sanction laying on the Russians. And the third point, which is completely important, is that Germans are willing to deliver defense equipment to the Ukrainian army. On Thursday, they've tried to use the Netherlands in order to send over missiles against tanks. And already on Sunday, they've decided to basically directly move these defense weapons to the Ukrainian army. So just to wrap up the German part, I think that it's quite obvious and clear that there's been a huge paradigm change. Unfortunately, the dream about the United Europe, including Russia, or trying to let Russia be a part of the greater European sphere, is now being shattered. People are starting to quit. People are speaking again about paradigms of the Cold War. And sadly, it looks like Europe is preparing itself to a long-term conflict where nobody really knows the exit strategy of President Putin. And thus, all scenarios are on the table. Now, Adrian asked a very important question: where does this all put Israel? As you might all imagine, Israel has a very unique position, both with Russia and the Ukraine. Israel has also officially, up until last night, very scarcely positioned itself vis-a-vis the Russian activities, and has been perceived by the West as a potential mediator or potential door opener with President Putin. This, of course, increased in light of the fact that President Putin refuses now to take calls from any European leaders but the French President Macron. So it puts Israel in a position where the West, from one side, expects Israel to be a part of the greater coalition against Russia. But at the same time, Israel, with its own interests and the fact that we have a large Russian army situated in Syria, basically puts Israel in this awkward or tricky position where Israel has to make sure that it doesn't get crashed when these two giants, the Americans and the Russians, are fighting. So I think those would be my opening comments. Adrian, would you like to set any other questions or?
I think, firstly, thank you very much, Avi. I definitely learned a lot there. I know Dima is also, he ran out of a conference to join us. So I'd like to hand over to him as well.
Right. I would have to leave you as well. If there's any needs, please let me know later with the text and I'll try to connect again.
Thank you, Avi. Look, what we might try and do is get you back at a time when you're a little less busy.
Yeah, I'll be more than happy. If there are further questions and Adrian sees towards the end of the hour that there's still interest or room, he can text me and I'll try to rejoin you guys in a few minutes if that's okay with you.
All right. Thank you, Avi. Thanks for your time.
Have a great flight.
Bye-bye.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Dima, you're on mute. Can you unmute yourself? Or can the same time mute him? Can you mute Dima, please? Dimitri?
No, you can unmute yourself. That's it.
I unmute. Yeah, I'm here.
So thank you very much again for coming at the conference. The question to to Dima, who's an expert on Russia, and actually wrote his postdoctoral thesis on Russian strategy and political maneuverings in the 2000s, which could never be more appropriate than now. If you could also talk a bit about Russia and address also how it affects Israel from that perspective.
Sure, no problem. Well, Avi really, he provided us with a good covering of the ongoing situation. I will try to address a more points on the Russian reasons, on how we get to this situation, how we all got to this situation, and say the following thing. I think there are a few significant points which we can already emphasize. First, we see what happens when the security services and bureaucratic apparatus of collapsed totalitarian state aren't cleansed by the young democracy, which Russia was in early 90s. It was a huge mistake of Yeltsin's government to lay on the old good KGB as a security service. The eternal imperialistic beast just waited for the opportunity, and Vladimir Putin provided it with such an opportunity. In his kleptocratic regime, the security services became in fact a ruling elite for the first time in Russia's history. We always had their strong security services, but they never let them to rule the state. Putin was the first to do it. And we are completely not prepared for that. Every single KGBist can be a good politician, can be a good bureaucrat, but not as an elite. And now Russia and all of us just pay the price of this mistake of Mr. Putin. Previously, the political management was, as I say, was always holding them tight, limiting the purely professional sphere of activity. And the country, okay, I already said it. But under Putin, we really became the significant part of political management. They're everywhere, governors, managers of the government industry, energy sector. The securitists became the almighty mafia of Putin's Russia. It was one of the main factors behind degradation of Russia's economy, science, civil society, media, and diplomacy. All these faults were covered by a powerful propaganda of greatness, I mean domestic propaganda of greatness for the Russian citizens. Now, democratic Ukraine was a huge challenge for Putin's political model by its very existence. I think it's critical to understand the very existence of a democratic Ukraine just challenged Putin's regime. And Putin, who backed himself to corner by a combination of propaganda on the one hand and economic and political deterioration of his state on the other hand, decided at some point, as we can see, to throw all the money on roulette like a compulsive gambler, aiming to three things: to subjugate Ukraine once and for all, to scare the whole Western world to shiver, and of course to transform the Western world to much more, threatened negotiator, and finally to force other neighbors except Ukraine to obey his will. Excuse me. However, we cannot already, but Putin was wrong, completely wrong. Ukraine didn't surrender as he expected. He for sure expected that the president of Ukraine will just, flee to Washington. And in fact, Ukrainians are fighting fiercely for every piece of their land. The West is united and reacted quite strongly, albeit mainly in economic terms and by providing Ukraine with arms. Finally, the Russian military has been much less effective than expected. I'm personally expected that Ukraine will lose their anti-air systems, strategic communications, and their aircraft in few hours. It was my expectation. And as you can see, I was completely wrong. The Russian army is indeed much less effective than everyone could expect. Summing up, of course, we can't know how this war will end, but it is absolutely clear that the democratic world must do anything necessary, do not depend on Russian energy, and be ready, even to be ready to put this dictatorship in place by military means. It's possible. It just can happen whatever we want or not. I mean, okay, so the West must be ready for it. we have no right to be scared by Putin's harsh nuclear threats. If the West will express weakness in that regard, Putin just will conclude that further exploitation of nuclear issue may serve his interests, and West will become really, really threatening and dangerous. Finally, in regard to Israel, I think that Israel leadership must take a really careful position. Exactly as Avi noted, Israel has very, very unusual and special position both for the West and even more important for Russia, for Putin. It's a long story, I have no time to explain it now, but we are really some very, very special actor, international actor for me. Thus, on the one hand, I think that our leadership must stay strong, and if we find it necessary to condemn Russia and to send to Moscow messages of our disagreement with their deeds, but on the other hand, do not lead any effort against Russia. Meanwhile, do not provide Ukraine with our weapons and arms, and to stay on the very balanced position. But again, do not let Russia think that we are in their pocket. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. We are a part of the West, and we need to follow the Western position, but carefully, saving our special position between Russia and Ukraine. I think it summarizes the main points that I wanted to say here now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dima.
I have a few minutes for questions if you want.
So, unfortunately, there's many questions popping up. Unfortunately, we don't have time to get into them. I want to get back to our main agenda. Alan, you want to say something?
Yes, no, I think we'll go back to our main topic. I mean, this issue is, of course, very new, and perhaps we'll try and get your two experts on another night to discuss the Ukraine situation in a little more depth. So, Dimitri, thank you very much for your time, and we'll look forward to chatting with you again when we set that up. Thank you, Adrian, for facilitating that. Okay, we're going to go back to our main topic now. And originally established as a small college in 1982, Ariel University is now a highly acclaimed institute of learning, comprised of 26 departments that caters for 14,000 students of Orthodox and secular Jewish, as well as Arab, Druze and Circassian backgrounds. It also has the largest number of Ethiopian-born students in any Israeli university. Ariel University hosts visiting lecturers from around the world and has a range of programs and international cooperation agreements with over 51 higher education institutions around the world. It is home to a variety of research centres in medicine, robotics and even wine research. In short, Ariel University is a leader in academic achievement, but most of its accomplishments are pushed aside because of one other fact that dominates world attention, and that is that it's in Samaria and therefore situated on the wrong side of the green line. In fact, Wikipedia describes its location to be in a, quote, settlement, and as a result, it has been the target of boycotts from organisations in the United States, the European Union, Britain, Spain and Germany. This is not to ignore the security and financial challenges that also exist. So what do those involved with the university say about all this? How do they deal with it, and are they achieving any successes? To take us through this minefield, we're delighted to have two representatives from the university join us tonight. We have Bobby Brown, who's the Senior Vice President for Resource Development and External Affairs, and Adrian Treger, Director of Donor Relations in the Department of Resource Development. Gentlemen, welcome to our Australian Zoom session, and thank you for your time today. So to set the scene, Adrian, I think you guys are going to start with a short presentation, and then David will have a few questions before we open it up to the audience. Now, we're obviously running a little bit behind schedule, but it was important to get the update on Ukraine, so we'll just see how we go. So, Adrian, over to you.
Thank you very much. I'll share screen. Give me 1 second. Yeah. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Welcome to Ariel University, Israel's newest and fastest growing university. Ariel University is proudly situated in the heart of biblical Israel. It includes 7 faculties, 474 faculty members, and over 16,000 students. 29% of all Ariel University students study engineering in the second largest engineering school in Israel. The Ariel University School of Medicine is preparing Israel's future physicians by teaching them advanced medicine, research, humanities, and communication skills. In conjunction with the paramedical departments at the Faculty of Health Sciences, which teaches hundreds of students additional healthcare-related professions, Ariel University has become a major influence in the improvement of Israel's healthcare system. Ariel's award-winning School of Architecture is one of Israel's most prestigious schools for architectural studies. The Faculty of Natural Sciences is harnessing science for new discoveries and developing new practical applications. The Moskowitz School of Communication is Israel's only university school of communication that provides practical and professional hands-on training. The Faculty of Social Sciences and Humanities is a fountainhead of experiential learning. Ariel University is evolving into a world-class institution with groundbreaking research and academic excellence through innovative interdisciplinary collaboration. The university has a great impact on the entire region, improving the health and environment of all residents of the area. With 2,500 employees, it is the largest employer in Samaria. Ariel's diversified student body, representing the great and unique variety of Israeli people, enjoys a warm and embracing atmosphere and extensive student services. Academic excellence, breakthrough research, innovation, and a better future. Together for the future of Israel, the region, and the world.
Let me close that. Stop share.
You must have seen videos like this before.
Hold on, sorry. Okay. So, do you guys can Bobby start? Do you want Bobby start talking, or do you want to ask questions?
Well,
we're happy to run it either way. Adrian, do you have any elaborations, any comments you want to make at this stage?
Bobby, would you like to start mention?
Yes, the media has described Judea and Samaria over and over again, and the image that comes both to our friends and to our less than friends is that it's a bunch of small villages, it's a bunch of towns on a hilltop somewhere. They are suburban communities that work in the big cities. And we have broken the mold. When you think of Ariel, you don't think the world's expert in compact particle accelerators being used to attempt to cure various kinds of cancer. You don't think of a wine institute that has patented numerous patents on how to develop wine better, how they have searched all over Israel and, for instance, found vines in the Negev that need very little water, that can change the whole picture of agriculture in desert climates. They have taken seeds preserved seeds from archaeological sites and taken out the DNA and created a wine that we believe is similar to the wine that King David drank. We have 28% of our 17,000 students are in various disciplines in engineering. We have become, in many of the fields, the second best, only outdone by the Technion, and in some fields, even the best in Israel. We're the largest engineering school in Israel. And it goes on and on and on. And what we're doing is we're changing the image. We are the largest employer in Judea-Samaria. Every single day, 17,000 students come here from everywhere, from Metula in the north to Eilat in the south, and learn with world-class professors, world-class scientists, researchers, and we are fast becoming higher and higher on the ranking of universities in Israel, which are very high to begin with. It doesn't mean that we don't have difficulties. Up until recently, we were not allowed to get research money from the United States or Europe. A year ago, the United States changed their regulations, changed their laws, and today Ariel University can compete for research grants from the US government as any other university can. At the same time, Europe completely boycotts us, European Union. And whereas individual universities have relations and have joint projects, the EU stops us from getting research money, and that of course harms our research. I don't want to take up too much time. I'd like time to take your questions and answer anything you'd like to ask about Ariel, but we are a success. And we are shocking the world by showing that Judea-Samaria is not only an asset for the state of Israel, it's an asset for the world.
Thank you, Bobby. David, perhaps I'll hand over to you now, and we can start the discussion, and then we'll go to questions shortly.
Okay, I'll ask you a few quick questions, and either Adrian or Bobby can answer. Can you say something firstly about the student demographics? What are the type of students, the mix of students that attends Ariel University? And in particular, what proportion are Arabs?
We have approximately somewhere between 11 and 12% Arab students. Most are Arabs from Israel proper. We have Arabs in our dorm. There is no discrimination in any way. We are a recognized university of the Israel Council of Higher Learning. And of course, there are all kinds of regulations against any kind of discrimination. Recently, we opened our synagogue in Ariel, and we had a group of Muslim students come and they said they wanted to open a mosque. And what my response was, is we found a donor for a synagogue, help us find a donor for a mosque, and you can have a mosque. And we mean that with all respect. We don't have demonstrations. Our students know we are a Jewish heritage school. We are a Zionist school. Every classroom in Ariel has an Israeli flag. Every ceremony we have ends with the singing of Israel's national anthem, the Hatikva. We have students from all over the world, many surprises. We have over 20 students going for their PhDs from India. We have more and more of an international base. The only place we do not have an international base, and we don't want one, is in our medical school. Israel has a tremendous shortage of doctors, and we feel it's a national obligation that our students will be Israeli citizens or residents and practice their medicine here in Israel. I can say there is an unbalance there. We are in our third year of the medical school. We have taken 70 students a year. That will go up. But last year, out of 70 students, we had 54 who were females. So there is the acceptance is purely on the basis of merit, and the women are doing much better than the men.
Okay, we'll leave that one alone for a moment. Can I say
add what Bobby was saying there, sorry, David, that in the medical school, which is fulfilling such a huge need in Israel, I'm sure you guys have read the articles that we the OECD country, the highest amount of doctors studying outside. I believe right now there's 2,000 Israeli medical students stuck in the Ukraine, which may be approximately the equivalent to all the medical schools in Israel. But we're also building on campus Israel's first medical on-campus medical center, just connect to the medical school, which we're now in the process of requesting a government approval to change the hospital. It's been built with 4 heavy-duty operating theaters. The first hospital built in Judea-Samaria, a Jewish hospital, which will be serving the entire community, Arabs, Jews, everybody, of course, also security services, creating a massive life-saving opportunity. It's something that we hopefully have MRI services, which I know in Melbourne there's 300 clinical MRI machines. Israel's got 12. So our feeling of responsibility to meet a need for the country is extreme. It will also be a teaching hospital, which is also lacking in Israel. So that will feed every part of the demographic as well.
David, can I just jump in for a moment with a quick question for you, Adrian? Do you build any of these sorts of facilities underground?
So when it came for the hospital, for example, there's certain requirements from the Home Command. So we had to take the original structure for the medical center, beef up the walls, etc., to retain missile strength, because hospitals stay open during wartime as well. We had to build 2 underground water reservoirs. I think it's about 500 cubic water, 2 pools, to be safe as well. So it's got its own safe water system. So that's done underground, and there's other defensive that have to be incorporated as well.
And of course, our dormitories, like all buildings in Israel, are built with security in mind, with safe rooms in case of war, in case of trouble. But that's the standard for all of Israel, and we follow the same standard.
You mentioned that you have some difficulties with the European Union, which is to be expected. Not the same difficulties now with the US. Is the BDS campaign targeting Ariel University, and perhaps the legislation in the US is having some positive effect? Have you been targeted by the BDS campaign?
Well, we have been targeted many times. We do not want to be the BDS poster child.
Sure.
So we don't stress where we're located. We're very proud of where we're located, but we don't stress it. We stress our academic excellence. I can give you an example. Our School of Architecture entered a contest in Spain. And shortly before the contest, they told us we could not participate, even though we had a team already on its way to Spain.
Wow.
The university went to a Spanish court. The Spanish court ruled in favor of the university, and Ariel University came in second. The architect who was the chief student architect of this project happened to have been an Arab. So we're proud that we came in second. We'd like to come in first, but we didn't. In any event, we will fight if we feel that we're being targeted unjustly. And in cases where we don't have the leverage, such as in the EU, we will do what we can to go around it and to continue academic excellence and breakthrough research.
If I can add to what Bobby is saying, sorry, David, obviously the most important thing for a research university is research. If you consider facts like Horizon 2020 or Erasmus Fund are giving millions and millions of dollars to research universities both in Israel and in other countries, which are then matched by the government. So it's millions upon millions of dollars, of which we have no access to the funding. So that's cutting off a very important vein of lifeblood to a research university, which means that we have to find some of the shortfall we've managed to negotiate to the government and make up a bit. But really most of the shortfall is picked up either by people who support us or by us dipping into our own pockets, which we have expensive consider facts, for example, the program with Ethiopian students or program for autistic students, where we really take many resources to make sure they have equal opportunity in life to an academic education and opportunity for financial future. And there's a huge drain on our resources. So I think in BDS, in that sense, is maybe having its greatest effect, is actually trying to choke what enables us to do groundbreaking research. And as Bobby mentioned, a lot of our research is actually breaking records around the world. As Bobby made mention of our Compact Particle Accelerator Center, which we are recognized as the best in the world. Even CERN turned to us for advice on how to work and how to help them. You know, lacking these resources is massive with the wine, etc., and many other areas. We've got one of the leading centers in Israel for personalized medicine. So this is a huge issue where BDS is affecting stuff without hitting headlines.
Well, I want our guests to know, as well as our audience, that AJA is very active in trying to advocate for anti-BDS legislation in Australia. Unfortunately, we have seen a growth in BDS type activity here. And if I can, no, I'll do it another time. So we're on your side. We want to see the opportunities for Ariel University as well as Israel facilities generally, although we don't have universal support even within the Jewish community for that yet. I'll just show you very quickly. This is draft legislation, Contract Prohibition Discriminatory Boycotts Bill, which we are advocating amongst politicians. So the UK is looking at it at the moment, as you're probably aware. US has it. Australia does not, but we're pushing for it. So I hope that's of some help. Finally, are you on an equal?
Not some help, it's a great deal of help. We thank you.
Appreciate it, Bobby. We are doing what we can. Are you on an equal footing when it comes to the Israeli government? Do they treat you equally with other universities?
I'm sorry, I froze for 1 second.
Does the Israeli government treat you equally with other universities, or is there a complexity because of where Ariel is located?
I don't believe that the Israeli government discriminates against us because of where we're located. I think they try to be fair. We are the new kids on the block. So many long-standing contacts and long-standing contracts with various Israeli government institutions are not yet equal. I will say that one of the branches of the government that very much enjoys working with Ariel is the military. we having such a strong base in engineering and science, they come to us often. We don't have, some of the other schools have people who are on the left side of the spectrum who object to the Army coming into the university. And certainly here we welcome them and we welcome anything they can do. I'll tell you a quick story. The first time I went to a mechanical engineering department, they said, "Would you like to see our Caterpillar?" And I said, oh, it's a tractor? They said, no, a caterpillar. And what it was, during the Intifada, they sometimes had to cut the communications in a given area. And so a soldier had to climb up a pole, cut the wires and climb down. During that time, he was open to snipers, and a few of them got hurt. So they turned to Ariel, and Ariel made a caterpillar, a mechanical machine that actually climbs the pole. And then as it climbs the pole, it has two cameras and can see, and little scissors up there, and can cut it. And God forbid, if they're snipers, they can shoot a mechanical caterpillar, but there will be no loss of life to any soldier or anyone else. And that's the kind of outside thinking that we do on so many issues, that our cyber defense team is run by a former member of the military who established cyber defense for the Israeli army. And I can't go into great detail on what they do, but they are every day saving lives of Israelis and saving lives of probably many, many Western countries.
Alan, let's open it up for general questions.
Okay, just before we do, if you're listening on J-Air, this is the Australian Jewish Association Zoom event, which we have every Wednesday night. Our guests tonight are Bobby Brown and Adrian Treger from Ariel University, and we're discussing the political and security challenges it faces because of its location in Samaria. David, I'll just hand back to you for 1 minute to tell us what's happening next week.
Okay, we'll do that very quickly. Let me just bring it up. Here we are. Okay, next week, we have one of the most incisive British commentators on the Middle East, Peter Baum, who is foreign affairs editor for a couple of institutions, and we will be doing some myth busting, challenging the false narrative on the Israel-Palestine conflict. And finally, just as we always do, and please, if you haven't yet done any of these things, don't turn off your computer this evening without applying for membership of the Australian Jewish Association, joining the email list via the website at jewishassociation.org.au, making a contribution of some sort. We can't do our work without tangible support. Thank you.
Thanks, David. Okay, we'll go to questions. Hopefully we can fit everyone in. Well, I've got Ron, Anthony, Brian, and I see Eric's just put up his hand. So we'll start with you, Ron. Please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi, good evening. Adrian, I actually visited your office some 3 years ago. I spoke to Nicole. We were just out at the moment and I had to go back, but it's lovely to meet you. Thank you. I wanted to ask you regarding the BDS of the EU and specifically the Horizon program, which excludes Ariel. Has Ariel ever tried to emulate, perhaps adding another string to the bow by trying to conceptually and operationally work with a Horizon type situation with countries like India, Singapore, Australia, high-tech countries, and bypass the EU?
Yeah, so what we've tried to do, and to some extent succeeded, is we've set up what we call a hub system. And the idea is that we partner with another organization, Israel Abroad, and then if we get a donor donates money to us, we'll put it into a fund. And then we can connect that fund to a partner program in another universal organization overseas. And they'll put funding on their side. It's a joint fund, so they'll match it. And they can go and apply for matching of their funds to some kind of European opportunity. And that means that a donor will put in money, they'll get double their money's worth because the other organization will also match it. And then it'll be quadruple the amount, because that general fund, that partner will then go and also try to get matching from European or another country fund, does that in Europe, to help that. And then what will, that fund then will go into specific research, which a donor could also request a specific kind of research that they want, whether it be medicine or engineering, anything else. And that fund will then also go into outputs, could be IP, all kinds of stuff, which may then generate some form of income back into the fund. And that's how at the moment we're trying to get around that.
Okay.
In the past, Ariel University wanted to send some of its faculty to an institute run by the EU in which they could improve their English. That was a commercial institution, and of course Ariel was willing to pay for the services. They refused us because we're in Judea and Samaria. The level of discrimination against the only Jewish university, not the Arab universities in Judea and Samaria, is just astounding.
Okay, thanks, Bobby. Anthony, please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Thank you for your presentation. It's found it most interesting. And you obviously have a very diverse range of students at your university. I have a particular interest in the success of the Ethiopian Aliyah. And given that their success is probably a light to many of the potential Jews in Africa, have they fitted in to with their enthusiasm? Have they encountered any setbacks or anything, or were they a success, the success we hope they would be?
Well, actually, it's a good question. Almost all the Ethiopian students we have are the first generation of their family to go for a higher education. Many of them do not make the qualifications that are needed in our school or in any other school. And we have two policies we try to do. Number one, on those students who have the potential but don't necessarily have the criteria, we try to bring them up. We try to have them, tutor them to be able to get the kind of scores and tests that they may be lacking. We've been pretty successful in that. The other thing is we have students who would drop out because they don't have Israel isn't like America charging huge amounts of money for an education in a university, but nevertheless there is a fee here which is dictated by the government, and many of our Ethiopian students don't have it. And we vow to do our best that no student, Ethiopian or otherwise, but certainly Ethiopians, should ever drop out of university because of financial difficulties.
I'd also like to add to that the first, getting Ethiopian student into the university is only the first stage. The next stage is actually making sure they succeed in their studies. Now, the threat of their success comes from a number of matters. One is what I mentioned, the financial issue, but also there's a lot of psychological issues which have to be dealt with. And that's why the department who deals with them gives all kinds of programs with social workers, psychologists, helping them deal with challenges, both from the needs from their family and their integration into the student populace, as well as helping them to be able to deal with the workload, and then preparing them, because what does it help having a rod if you can't fish? So it's actually helping them to get into the work market and train them, teach them how to deal with the job interview and how to integrate into the job market. So that's, Bobby, maybe you want to pick up on that. We have a nice story about that.
I have to tell you one quick story. We have formed a Israel Friends of Ariel University, and we're trying to get people who are on a very high level who can help us with contacts, with funding, to be able to continue and expand our work. One of the people who we approached was the head of the water company, the director general of the water company. And we asked him, would you be willing to serve on our Friends Committee to help Ariel University? And he said, I will do anything to help Ariel University. I love Ariel University, but I have one condition. So I said, uh-oh, here it comes. So I said, what's the condition? He says, you have to take my chief engineer too. So we said, well, we don't normally go down to the level of engineering. We try to have director generals, chairmen into this very elite group. I said, could you tell me why you think we should take this engineer? He said, there are 3 reasons. First of all, he's the best engineer in Israel. I said, that's wonderful, I guess. Second of all, he's a graduate of Ariel University. I said, oh, that's interesting. And third of all, he's Ethiopian. So I said, wow, okay, we'll take him. And
well done.
We have, and he's wonderful. He's helping us. He's giving us, helping us to get scholarships for our engineering students. He's giving students work experience and jobs after they graduate. So he's been absolutely tremendous. And we are very, very proud of the progress we made. At a given point, someone in the higher education said, look, you know, it's such a financial drain on you. Maybe you should be taking in proportionally less. And we said, no, we want to take in proportionally more. Because our job as a Zionist is to help. I mean, along these lines, we have sometimes Arab students who are in our dorms. Why are they in our dorms? Because they have opposition in their Arab village, and yet they want a top-level education. So they want to be able to come to Ariel without having any kind of hostility from some of their neighbors. So they ask if there's room in our dorms, and of course, such people get priority.
Yep, thank you. Brian, please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Okay, so I visited Ariel 15 years ago, and there were 4 things that struck me as quite unique, and I wanted to ask you if they're still there. One you've answered. I saw an Israeli flag in every classroom. The other was a strong Russian influence. It was evidently founded by Russians. Initially, they collaborated with Eastern European countries in Russians. I saw Russians actually building some of the new buildings, and that the Arabs preferred to come there because of the Russians. The other was that there were factories all around which were manufacturing the inventions of the universities. And the last was what fascinated me most, because I've done theoretical physics. They were the world's expert in thermodynamics, and they got through to the European Horizon project via the back door because the European scientists wanted to learn thermodynamics from them, and that came from the Russians.
Well, you hit upon a very important secret. When the Russian scientists, when they were in Russia and they invented something phenomenal, the first thing they did was to hide it from the government, because they didn't want the government to take over their invention, give them a small pin of Lenin, and not be able to benefit in any other way from their own inventions. So when they came here, they were bubbling over with enthusiasm and knowledge and wanting to get into the higher education system. And they would go to Tel Aviv University or Hebrew University or any of the more established universities. And they were told, and they said, look, we'd like to become professors, scientists. And they were told, well, not so fast. There are a lot of people in front of you. You can now start as a junior lecturer, and after 5 years, you can go all the way up to a lecturer. And they obviously looked at themselves as having a higher status before, when they were in the former Soviet Union. And Israel was chock full of these people. And the one place they could go and really progress with Ariel, because Ariel was new, it was starting out, it needed everything. So they came here, and in fact, the rector or provost that just finished his term was a Russian. The new rector is a Russian, and many of our professors, older professors, are Russian, and they gave us tremendous boost scientifically. I don't know about the case you mentioned with Europeans, but I do know that there is a lot of both formal connections with European universities who break with the EU, and there are also a lot of informal. And I think if there's cooperation between scientists, the EU turns their back. They won't fund it, but they allow it. As far as there's a new trend in Israel, first of all, the tremendous shortage of engineers and doctors, and we're producing both. There's a tremendous new trend, which is more and more happening, which is monetizing research. That much of the research has tremendous potential in the outside markets, and all kinds of VC companies, all kinds of investors, all kinds of Israelis who are into .com and computer-generated companies are actually searching the halls of the universities, trying to get involved, and where it looks commercially possible to profit, they want to invest and they want a piece of it. And that's happening.
Yes.
Okay. Also, a quick note, I know we're running short on time, but in reference to the previous question about how do we get around BDS, etc., and what Bobby mentioned now, we've started a very strong program of cooperating with companies. A university has immense research that's advantageous to all kinds of companies. And we found that when they come in, they sometimes support us by providing funds to beef up our equipment to help with the research. And that actually helps the companies to be more beneficial. They get access to engineers or scientists that they can then maybe give scholarships to, and then can come work for them for X amount of years afterwards. And it's a very big win-win situation. And that's something we would like to expand to international corporations as well. So if there's opportunity, we would love to work with Australian companies where they could be involved with our research, help us sponsor it, and then gain advantage for their own development out of that agreement.
Yep, thank you, Adrian. Now, we are coming up to time, but Eric's been waiting. So, Eric, please unmute yourself and ask your question.
I'll be very quick. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes. Funnily enough, I was going to ask the same question about Ethiopians because through JNF, I've been very interested in their situation in Israel because there's some resistance and bias and so forth. So I'm very happy about the ethos of Ariel approaching them. I have visited the village, the Ethiopian village south of Tel Aviv and so forth, but that's fantastic. All power to Ariel University.
Okay, thank you, Eric. Look, we'll try and fit Saul in. If you've got a quick question, Saul, we'll take your question.
Quick question, indeed. What do you offer in the liberal arts?
All Israeli universities are lighter on liberal arts than on science. We have just about all of the liberal arts departments, but they are very much smaller than the other ones. We are about to open now our Jewish Heritage Center, which is a major building in Ariel. And in that, there will be 3 very interesting departments that are more liberal arts. Number 1, we hope to open up a teacher training school for diaspora Jews. There are many, many countries, especially in Latin America and Eastern Europe, that cannot train their own Jewish teachers. And we hope to have the center here in Ariel. The second is one of the biggest struggles that ever happened since the State of Israel declared was the fight, the worldwide fight, and I know in Australia there were many activists for the freedom of Soviet Jewry. And there was no center for that study and to document and to keep records and to do research in all of Israel. We hope to open the first one here. And the third is a very special aspect of the Holocaust. We are now just about lost the last few Holocaust victims who were children when the Holocaust happened? And what will be after there are no more Holocaust victims alive? And for that, we're worried that the only people who will learn about the Holocaust will be history majors and majors in Judaic studies. So we would like, along with Christian universities, along with Muslim universities, to begin doing mini curriculum so that a doctor who's learning medicine will have a short curriculum on what did the medical system do during the Holocaust? What did the journalists, what happened to journalism during the Holocaust? What happened to the legal system during the Holocaust? And so all kinds of people taking different subjects will also have some learning and some knowledge about the nature and the lessons and the history of the Holocaust.
Yeah, thank you.
Great work.
Excellent. Yes. Now we are out of time. Adrian and Bobby, I mean, the thing that impresses me so much about Israel is that while our politicians here in Australia talk a lot about a lot of things, you guys actually do things. And it's fantastic. And thank you for such an interesting insight into your university. You guys are at the forefront of the fight against the BDS movement. And at the same time, you're still showing the world what Israel can achieve. So kol hakavod to the whole university. Thank you for joining us. Just tell us the website if people want to have a little look at a bit more about you.
It's I'll send a link if you like.
Okay, or put a link on the chat before you go, Adrian, and people can have a look at it. So thanks again to both of you. It was wonderful to have you. And I'll just mention again for those that came in a little bit later, we had a very last minute addition. There were two of the university people who are experts on Ukraine, Europe, Russia, that sort of thing. And they gave us an update for about 10 or 15 minutes before we started. So that was most invaluable also. So thank you again to Adrian and to Bobby, and we wish you all success in your endeavours.
Thank you for the work you do every day and every Wednesday.
I placed the link on the chat, and before I send it, I read some of the comments that are popping up while we're doing the talk, which was so wonderful and so welcome, so warm. I want to thank all of your guests and you guys for having an amazing, wonderful audience. The support and the messages, the chats were incredibly supportive, invigorating, and thank you all very, very much. It was wonderful.
Thanks, Adrian. Now, just before we go, the L'chaim program with Morris Klein is on right now. It's on 3ZZZ, FM 92.3 or www.3ZZZ.com.au. That's all we have for tonight. Join us next week with our guest Peter Boehm to discuss how to fight the fake news of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Don't forget that you can keep up to date with what AJA is talking about on our Facebook page, so please like it and share it widely. But for now, we wish you all a very good evening and look forward to seeing you again next week as usual. So from me, it's bye for now. Good night to you all.